Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. This show presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. Our guest today, Kevin Ingram. We'll talk Vanderbilt baseball, but first, basketball will be the topic as we talk about Vandy's really strong end of the season close, and now the Commodores have a chance against Dayton to make the Elite Eight of the NIT. Kevin appears on the guest line. That's presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell. That number 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Now on to our interview with Kevin Ingram. Kevin Ingram joins us today. You know him as one of the two play-by-play voices of the Vanderbilt Commodores. Kevin, interesting times. We got a lot going on at once. You got the start of SEC baseball play this weekend. We'll get into that a little later. You got spring practices started. We won't hit that today, though we may next week or in a couple weeks. But first and foremost, postseason basketball, I think, is mostly what's on people's minds. And Vanderbilt has closed the season strongly, advanced to the second round of the NIT with a really good second half against Belmont. And now has got Dayton at home and a chance to get to the Elite Eight. It has been an interesting run the last couple of weeks for the Commodores.
Yeah, it really has, Chris. Vanderbilt, I thought, played really well in the games down in Tampa in the SEC tournament. Of course, to go back a couple of weeks, finished up the regular season with a win over Ole Miss down in Oxford. But then blew out Georgia, which, Georgia was at the end of the Tom Crean era, and then played Alabama. Came back from 15 down with about 14 minutes left in that game and just closed strong and scored 54 points in the second half and won to advance to the quarterfinals. And I thought played really well against Kentucky for a whole lot of the game. Had a little run there around halftime, especially after the break, and led by 7. Kentucky, Ty Washington got hot, hit some threes, and they kind of did what they do. But overall, I thought there was a lot to feel good about coming out of Tampa. And then on Tuesday against Belmont, Bruins came out red hot. They were making shots, and Will Richard, the freshman, was really, really good. And Vanderbilt, though, I thought as the game went along, they sort of wore him down. The big guys are excellent. Liam Robbins and Quentin-Millora Brown combined, they have just a monster night. 22 points, 19 rebounds, and 5 blocks combined. And Jordan Wright continues to play so well at 27 against Kentucky and 24 against Belmont. So it's a lot of fun. And in the postseason, and different teams have different motivation levels when it comes to playing in the NIT. And this Vanderbilt team feels like they're very motivated to try to get to New York, win a couple more games here, and see if we can go play at the Garden.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things I wanted to get into. Jordan Wright has just had the best 2-game stretch of his career. To what do you attribute that?
It's kind of hard to say. He's really had a stretch of good games going back to the end of the regular season and then on into the SEC tournament. He had a double-double against Alabama, which he did more than just what you saw in the box score. He was chasing down loose balls, making saves, and getting blocks. He was just all over the place. He played great in the SEC tournament. I think he's just playing with confidence. I think he'd probably be one to tell you he's had some ups and downs this season, and I think the coaches have had to kind of encourage him and sort of bring him back up a few times as far as his confidence and so forth. But boy, he's just playing so well and scoring at all 3 levels. Scoring down low, he's hitting things from the mid-range, getting into the paint, and making some fadeaways and that sort of thing. But also shooting the ball really well from 3-point land. I've just been so impressed with Jordan and the way he's played, and getting rebounds and just doing all the things that it takes to win.
Well, you mentioned the post too, and Millora Brown goes 8 and 13. Robbins had 14, and I don't remember how many rebounds, but that's an impressive job because Belmont's got a stud big who I guess is now finishing up a stellar 4-year career.
Yeah, Nick Buzzinski is one of the best players in the history of Belmont's program, and the 2 big guys really did a great job. Belmont had 1 great big guy, and Vanderbilt had 2 excellent big guys, so I think the 2 was better than 1 in that game. But Moose got his points, but as the game went along, it felt like Vanderbilt's interior defense really performed well. And yeah, you combine those 2 big guys, and they didn't really, I don't know that they played them together at all during that game. We've seen some of that when they played both the bigs at the same time, but they switched them in and out. And Robbins certainly more of the offensive threat, but Q is a guy who's just one of the smartest players in the team and knows how to rebound and knows how to play defense. And you saw Jerry Stackhouse go offense for defense quite a bit as that game developed. But, yeah, the two big guys were as good as they've been all season in that game against Belmont on Tuesday.
Yeah, what did you make of how that game went? And I'm not saying this to discredit either team. We like to make explanations of Vandy did this better, and I do think it played harder probably the second half. But sometimes it's just Belmont was hitting a lot of shots early, and that didn't happen in the second half, and that probably had as much as anything to do with it as anything.
Yeah, and that's been sort of a bugaboo for Belmont throughout the season is inconsistent three-point shooting. They were red hot at the beginning of the game. Will Richard and Ben Shepard, who had a great season for them and shot, I think, around 40% from three. But they cooled off a bit as the game went along, and Vanderbilt was able to get a working margin in the second half, get some three-point plays. Rodney Chapman made a couple big threes. We talked about the play of Jordan Wright, but down the stretch, when Vanderbilt had to close out the game, it did a great job at the free throw line. You saw Robbins get up there a couple times, and Scottie Pippen Jr. as well knocked down those free throws, and that was what it took for Vanderbilt to finish the job. But yeah, I think just playing maybe better defense and Belmont not hitting from three when they got open looked a big factor in the game.
You know, it's been, again, a good 4-game stretch for them. A win over an Alabama team that's a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. Beating Belmont was a nice win. But I think, and then Ole Miss on the road in there too. But I think maybe the most impressive thing they did was hanging with Kentucky for so long. I think Kentucky, in fact, I think I'm picking Kentucky in my bracket to win the whole thing. I just thought the way they played them a night after a game, in an emotional, game where they really had to fight through that. Sometimes we don't have a lot left over. I think that might have been as impressive that the one loss as any of the 3 wins would have been.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. They really did play well against Kentucky and played with confidence against, as you said, one of the nation's best teams. I would pick them to go to a Final Four. Kind of looking at their a pretty good draw, but yeah, hanging in there. I mean, Sheboy is certainly he was SEC Player of the Year with good reason, and Ty Washington, he's battled some injuries a bit, but when he's on, he's just excellent. And they have so many offensive weapons, and I thought Vanderbilt did a good job of containing those guys for a whole lot of the night. But Kentucky just had a couple flurries right after Vanderbilt led by 7, and right before the end of the first half, they scored a couple baskets in a row and got a steal and a score, right there on an inbounds play. Was big, it felt like. But, yeah, I thought Vanderbilt did a good job. And Vanderbilt played them tough up in Lexington in that second game. Kentucky had the upper hand in the meeting in January down here in Nashville. But in 2 of the 3 meetings, I thought Vanderbilt played well against Kentucky. And really, you look at most of the games in the SEC, Vanderbilt was really competitive. Really, they didn't get blown out any other than maybe at Florida where Commodores just couldn't hit anything in the second half. But for the most part, really, really competitive throughout the SEC season.
What'd you make of the atmosphere Memorial against Belmont the other night? That's the loudest I've heard it, I think, in a while.
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was really fun. The students, that was as big of a student section as I can remember this season, certainly. But it was fun, both teams being so close by and students around for Vanderbilt. I think Belmont students were on spring break, so there might have been an even bigger crowd had the math worked out a little bit better on the schedule. But especially with a baseball game going on at the same time next door, that probably divided the crowd a little bit as far as who was going where. But it was a great crowd at Memorial. It was super loud, and I felt good for the players and coaches. Everybody put in a lot of hard work just to get to this point. Some people will poo-poo going to the NIT, but for this team, when you're trying to make the climb and develop your program, it's disappointing not to get a chance to be in the big dance, but to go to some postseason and continue your season and keep on playing was really big for this group. And I thought the fans did a good job of coming out and letting them hear about it.
And now it's official. I think they are hosting at 2:00 on Sunday, hosting Dayton.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It's an interesting situation because Dayton, I believe, has another tournament going on in their building. Obviously, They couldn't host yesterday or Tuesday because of the first 4 being played in their gym. So they didn't get to play their game against Toledo at home either. They would have played that game at home, but they had to go up to Toledo and play that one last night. But, yeah, Vanderbilt would have gone on the road had Dayton had an available place to play, but instead Dayton will come here. And so that'll be a tough matchup. Dayton's a good team. They've been a really good program for a lot of years. Anthony Grant's done a terrific job there. And it always feels like they got a bit robbed a couple years ago when they had Obi Toppin, and they were one of the best teams in the country going into the NCAA tournament, and obviously it got canceled, and they missed out on their chance to maybe make a really deep run in the thing, and came up just short of going to the big dance this year. So that will be definitely a tough matchup for Vanderbilt.
Well, Dayton had a really weird season because they had 3 just really awful losses. I think in November, I think one to Austin Peay, but I think one, I want to say at Kansas, and had some really nice wins, but it was the losses that really kept them from going to the NCAA tournament. In fact, you take 1 or 2 of those away, and they're not playing Vanderbilt. They're in the NCAAs against somebody. But, I'm not going to say the seasons were exact because we know the reasons for Vanderbilt's struggles early involved not having some good guys. But like Vandy, this is the team that played pretty well February, March, I guess, and just those early season things that didn't go your way in November really shaped the trajectory of where they went in the postseason, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I always laugh when people say that the games in November and December don't mean anything. For Dayton, those games probably meant everything. Their chance of getting an at-large bid, as you described, were probably torpedoed in November when they had like 4 straight losses to start off the year. Then they got things going. They played well in that tournament down in Orlando. They actually played Belmont in the final of that ESPN events at Disney, and they won, and Dayton won the tournament. But yeah, it's for them, I'm sure they felt like it was an uphill climb throughout the year just to make amends for those losses they had right at the beginning of the season.
Kevin, I guess if I got one concern, it's Scottie Pippen. He just didn't look like himself the other night. That's 2 games in a row. We talked about his high usage and how much this team depends on him. What are you seeing with him? How does he get his second win back?
Well, that's a good question. I thought, and Tim Thompson and I were talking about this on the broadcast, against Kentucky and then against Belmont as well. I thought he looked like maybe he was running out of gas a little bit. Man, you think about how many minutes he's played and the stretch that he was on. He had like 6 or 7 games where he scored over 20 points in that one stretch at the end of the regular season and all the way through to the SEC tournament. But he hasn't shot the ball especially well the last couple of games. But the one thing he typically does is get to the free throw line. And we really didn't see Vanderbilt get to the foul stripe as much as normal in that game against Belmont, except at the end of the game when Vanderbilt was able to close it out at the stripe. But yeah, you hope maybe Scottie, with a couple days here between games, you go from Tuesday to Sunday, maybe give him a little bit of rest and he'll get his legs back and be ready to roll. But gosh, he's just had such a tremendous season. And you think about the contact and the physical play that he absorbs game in and game out. The guy's bound to be tired as we get into game 35 of this season.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast is made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. And just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. And what people like about the experience is the ambiance. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. I went in and looked at it myself. That's exactly what it is. It is a relaxing, friendly environment. So whether your dental needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody. Call him at 615-270-2322. His office is located at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown Nashville, not far from the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player, a huge booster of Commodore athletics. His support as the title sponsor for Season 7 is the reason we are able to do this podcast. Go see Dr. Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of the Vandy Sports Podcast and tell him you heard about it here. That was a wild finish between Vandy and Michigan the other night.
It really was. It was funny. After the basketball game was over with, I stepped out and sat up in the stands and watched a little bit of the baseball game, Vanderbilt and Michigan. And it looked like the Commodores were going to come up short. They had plenty of chances and even had a chance in the bottom half of the 8th inning when Michigan had 4-2. But Then you get to the bottom of the ninth, and a big 2-run double by Tate Kolwick ends up at third base, and then the pass ball brings him home. So a crazy finish, and Vanderbilt wins. We've seen the Commodores score on a wild pitch or pass ball in key spots before, thinking back to Omaha last summer. But, yeah, that was a crazy finish, and this Vanderbilt team's been on a heck of a roll since that Sunday game against Oklahoma State. They haven't lost, and that's been about a month ago. They won 13 in a row as now they embark on the 30-game journey that is the SEC, and that'll happen against Missouri coming up on Friday.
You know, it's funny how you just get to thinking you know where baseball's going to go. And I'm sitting there watching the other night. I'm bringing my laptop over. I'm finishing writing my game story, so I'm not 100% in tune with what's going on with baseball. But I've been watching from the press box and everything, and you know, every time I look up, they got 2 guys on or the bases loaded and don't get that hit. So, you know, they get a couple guys on, and I'm thinking, well, we've seen this all night. And I'm thinking, okay, the fitting into this game would be Carter Young maybe hitting into a double play. And he hits a ground ball right to second. I'm thinking, there it is. They can't turn it. Next thing you know, they got men on the corners, and Kolwick just hits a screamer to left where the left fielder makes probably a bad play on the ball. It gets under his glove, and then, you know, a couple pitches later, wild pitch, and it's over. That one just changed everything about the flow of how it had gone all night in just like the blink of an eye. And it just was – it's one of those that's baseball moments that makes the game so fun sometimes and also so aggravating.
Yeah, I think if you're a Michigan fan, you're probably sitting there going, how did that game get away from us? Kind of felt like they probably were in great shape to have a chance to win and score a big road win against a top 5 team. You know, and for Vanderbilt, it's hard not to believe, as much as you've seen over these years with Tim Corbin, now in year 20, which is hard to believe. But, yeah, we've seen a lot of finishes like that, and you can add another one to the list with that victory against Michigan the other night.
I just keep watching the pitching, and I don't want to be premature here, okay? Because the tougher games are to come. There are some lineups in this league, in case you haven't heard. And you kind of hedge your bets until you see that. But my goodness, my impression is their pitching depth is off the charts this year.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. You lose Kamar Rocker and Jack Leiter, who are top 10 draft picks, and then you reload with a guy like Carter Holton, who's just ridiculous. I jokingly said he's like a left-handed Jack Leiter when you put him out there on Saturday. But McIlvain has moved into that Friday role, and we'll see what they do with Sunday. I think Maldonado's been battling it a little bit. He was not available for his start last week against Wagner, so we'll see where things go with him. I really don't have any idea of his status, but man, they keep on bringing those arms out there. Patrick Riley's look good. I still sort of wonder how Thomas Schultz is going to fit into things, maybe in the back end of that bullpen. That feels like what his role is going to be. But yeah, you got plenty of available people you can put out there, and it's going to be fun to watch how this thing develops, especially as you get into SEC play. And, as you said, the lineups are going to get way tougher than what we've seen so far. And it starts this weekend with Missouri, and we'll go from there.
I feel like they're gonna hit. I know it's been up and down, but you look across the board at some of the things. You'd like to see them walk a little bit more and strike out a little bit less, maybe. But you look, at the season Dominic Keegan's having. You look at the way Enrique Bradfield is coming on. You look at the way that Vaz and Diaz get on base. You look at how Spencer Jones is taking a step up. You look at Tate Kolwick's power production, which is back. You look at the depth. They got kids like Matthew Polk, who's been good enough to get some playing time. And you look at Gavin Cassis, who's, I guess, got the first base job for the time being and really has flashed the things that earned him the job with the power and things like that. I feel like this lineup is getting to a good spot. Now, look, they have one of these weekend series where they face a tough staff and maybe they take a step back. But it feels to me, and I know people are frustrated with the hitting and running hitters with runners in scoring position, but that comes and goes. I feel like this is the lineup. I'm starting to see the lineup that I thought they were going to have.
Yeah, I think when you watch this group, you're seeing, hey, everybody around the country strikes out a lot. That's going going to continue, whether it's Vanderbilt or anybody else. I mean, you're just going to see a lot of strikeouts, especially with the power arms that you see in the SEC. Now, I'm like you, would like to see guys get on base a little more, maybe a few more walks. But I think this group is more of a line drive hitting group than a power hitting group. And you see certainly some tremendous power at times from Dominic Keegan, who just hits rockets all over the place. Gavin Casas hit a home, just a tracer for a home run to right center in that game on Sunday and hit one down the line for a double. I've really been impressed with Spencer Jones. You see him, and he's 6'7". You think, oh, this guy's just one of those, big old dudes who just launches a bunch of home runs. But he's really more of a line drive hitter, and his power and success going the opposite way has been really impressive. I'm really happy for that guy. I know he's been through a lot injury-wise to get to this point, but now he's the everyday right fielder, and he's really performing well. I think Bradfield's going to hit and get on base. I feel like you can count on him. Davis Diaz has been so good there, right at the top of the order. The freshman, they put him in at third base, and he hasn't shown any signs of leaving the lineup anytime soon. But that first base spot's really interesting. The catching tandem of what looks like it's going to be Keegan and Bulger, that's probably going to stay in place. But when you got a lineup and you got a veteran guy like Parker Nolan, who's played as much as he has, and now he's having trouble cracking the lineup these days, that feels like a good problem to have. The lineup to me was never a concern going into this season, just given how many guys they had coming back off last year's team.
Yeah, I'm looking at strikeouts. There are 8 teams in the league that have struck out more times than they have. Now, a couple of those teams have played more games than they have, but there's a couple teams that have played less also. So I don't think, to your point, it's not really out of the ordinary. I think they're probably middle of the pack in that regard. Now, and I'll tell you, the concern I have right now is defense. I'm a little concerned about how they throw runners out or how that's going to go. Missouri's going to test them on the base pass, and I really would like to see that error number come down, although I think it will. I believe in the talent they've got there, but my goodness, it rose up and bit them again the other night against Michigan.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how things go as far as throwing out base runners, because Dominic Keegan, I mean, he's done a good job, and he's still unproven as far as being an everyday catcher at SEC play. We saw him throughout the season last year at first base, and he came in as a catcher. Jack Bulger came in as a catcher, so those guys will be put to the test. And it looks like Bulger's going to be the Saturday catcher when Holton's on the mound, and Keegan will go the rest of the time. But boy, that was a luxury you had last season with what they had behind the plate, and Rodriguez, CJ, he was so good and just so reliable, throwing out base runners and really controlling the run game and working well with the pitchers. That to me felt like that was a hard piece to replace going from last year to this year. But yeah, you have confidence in Keegan. He's a guy who's been around the program a long time, and he knows all the positions on the field and that sort of thing. So we'll see how he performs. But the one thing I like about this team up the middle, you got Carter Young and Tate Kolick at short and second. You got Enrique Bradfield in center, and you'll take your chances defensively with those guys for sure.
Pitching playing this weekend. You get the sense Maldonado's not going to be part of it. I don't know where they're going to go with Game 3. I don't know how much that depends on what happens in Games 1 and 2. For instance, do you burn a Patrick Riley for 4 innings, on a Friday or a Saturday? And if you do that, then he's not available for Sunday. Or if you don't, does maybe he get the start there? Does Devin Futrell have some tank in the gas? I think Sunday, they're going TBA, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think so too. It depends on how McIlvain pitches on Friday. McIlvain gets him 6 or 7 innings, and maybe that makes you think differently about what you do with Patrick Riley. Hunter Owens, he's pitched pretty well out of the bullpen, the lefty. So maybe have several options. Grayson Moore started last weekend. I don't know that they would run him back out there, in the third game of a conference setup, but. Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to hinge on how things go on Friday night as far as how things set up for the pitching for the rest of the weekend.
Kevin, we covered a lot of ground, got a lot of stuff to cover these days. Any parting thoughts before we end the show today?
I got a lot going on myself. I'm actually doing the women's NIT game tonight. That's the 7 o'clock start. on the Vanderbilt Sports Network. I'll be doing TV for baseball on Friday and Saturday on SEC Network Plus, 6 o'clock Friday, 2 o'clock Saturday. And then 2 o'clock Sunday, I'll be back on basketball with the Vanderbilt men in the NIT against Dayton. We'll be on the air 1:30 pregame. I know baseball's going to be going on. That's a 1 o'clock start on Sunday. So I was kind of hoping the baseball and basketball games wouldn't be on top of one another like they were back on Tuesday. It might have a chance to do both. I was kind of going to do my Kevin Harlan routine. I'm doing both games, but that's not going to work out that way unless there's some drastic time change on one or the other. But it's going to be busy. 4 games in 4 days here, but that's why you do it. So looking forward to it.
Hey, when you figure out where they've hidden the pause button, please send me a text and let me know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good luck with everything, Kevin. Also, before you go, tell people about what you guys have got going on with your podcast. Anything else through the school you'd like to promote?
Yeah, the podcast, the Anchor podcast usually comes out either late Thursday or early Friday. And then, of course, Monday we have Commodore Hour. It's at 6 o'clock on the Vanderbilt Sports Network. And that's also available in podcast form on Apple or Spotify. So you got some options where you can hear Andrew and myself and our weekly shows.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.